Good afternoon, fellow ruminators. Welcome back to another session, Rumination with Andrew. Thank you so much for joining as we are about to discuss a very important topical matter. And this afternoon, we are going to look at Amor Mottley again, right? Amor Mottley is in the editorial of the Jamaica Gleaner, and the Gleaner is vouching, is, forwarding its unwavering support for Amor Mottley to be the next General Secretary of the United Nations. So that is the Gleaner's proposal and its suggestions to CARICOM that they should push forward the application, and as well as let it be known that Amor Mottley is a qualified candidate for the next General Secretary of the United Nations. Now, it should be, it should fill Caribbean nationals with joy and their heart with some amount of warmth that Amor Mottley is up for, or even being considered to be the next candidate for the United Nations. But who is Amor Mottley? I think I've already described her to you, that she is a neoliberal president, even though she speaks much on progressive issues, but her economics is more geared towards that of neoliberalism, that she is about austerity, and much of what Elon Musk is doing. That is what she's all about. And many people don't realize a lot of what Elon Musk is doing is not different from what you see the Andrew Hornesses and the Portia Simpson Millers and the not PJ Patterson, but all of the others who have practiced the neoliberal agenda, right? It's not different. You were like, yes, I could call PJ Patterson because he was also atop of the FinSac debacle, which also was the deregulation of the Jamaican economy. And that is the era of neoliberalism in terms of its practice. Its heyday was in the 1990s, and globalization came in full swing. Now, the Gleaner here this morning in an editorial titled CARICOM Should Signal Amor Mottley for UN. 16 months ago, when the Gleaner last promoted her candidacy, we noted that Amor Mottley had not herself declared or even publicly hinted at any interest in becoming the Secretary General of the United Nations. Before I forget, let me hope that you will like the video before I continue, that the algorithm will be forced, because YouTube is, practicing its shenanigans, and they're not about truthfulness nor transparency. So please make sure that you like and you subscribe to the channel, and I will continue to give you that prompt so that you can be reminded. So, but neither has Miss Mottley attempted to squash any speculation or discussion of her appropriateness for the job, for which there will be an opening when Antonio Guterres' second term expires at the end of 2026, which dovetails nicely with the constitutional end of Miss Mottley's second term as Barbados Prime Minister. And she did that deliberately during the pandemic. She called the election, right, prematurely in Barbados, so that she knew that she was going to run up for the candidacy of the General Secretary of the United Nations. So she actually called the Barbadian general elections prematurely during the pandemic, and she won. She swept that election. So she knew that her friend Antonio Guterres would be resigning, or his tenure would have been up in 2026. So everything was planned. We don't know if she will get it, only God knows. She has not indicated if she intends to lead her Barbados Labour Party into another general election. Even if she does, out of the practical interests of her party and her appreciation of the vicissitudes of global politics, who hope it will be with the understanding of her willingness to embrace the UN Secretary General's position. For if anything, Miss Mottley's credentials are stronger now than the Gleaners previously made the case for her candidacy in 2023, and first floated the idea more than a year earlier. Now, it's interesting to note that the Gleaner is suggesting that her candidacy is even stronger. What has Amor Mottley done to have made her candidacy more stronger. She's more popular, we can say. But being popular does not mean that you come with substance, that you're doing anything. It's just that people like you and they like your rhetoric. So her rhetoric might have become more popular around the world. We have to give her that credit, right? Because she knows how to talk her talk. Is she walking the walk? That's another question. But she definitely knows how to speak in progressive terms. And I think that is on the basis on which the Gleaner is speaking, and not necessarily because she has done anything of great repute, right? Anything that would be anything of great, she has not impressed the world in the way the Gleaner is suggesting. Yes, our world is filled with a lot of mindless people. Yes, so maybe from that perspective, right? She has impressed them. When Mr. Guterres, a former Portuguese prime minister, still had 4 years on the clock. So Mr. Guterres is now about to resign, and his successor might be Amor Mottley. In that regard, the Caribbean community, of which Jamaica is a member, should forthrightly assert its view that the next Secretary General of the United Nations should come from this region and preferably should be a woman, both of which would be a first for the organization. In its 80th year existence, the UN has neither been led by a woman nor had a Caribbean national as its general secretary. Now, from a superficial standpoint, this would be great and would fill the Caribbean with great pride and joy, right? In a sense that women can achieve and they can accomplish that which men can also accomplish. And I am for that in terms of the fact that, yes, you have qualified women, and if they merit the position and they have done great things and their resume is equal to that of a male, that they should be given the position forthwith. And perhaps her resume is that of such. But let me suggest here that neither the men nor the women are doing anything great in the United Nations. It seems to me that it's much more of a fanfare, that people who work at the United Nations is just a farce, right? We know that for the most part that the United Nations does everything that the United States desires or dictates, right? That is what happens, that the United Nations really has to go with the agenda of the United States empire. In fact, it's domiciled on US soil. Let's not forget that fact, right? Let's not forget that the United Nations is domiciled on the United States shore, on its soil. And if you read the history of the United Nations, you will realize that it is not what it purports to be. But people have believed in it and think that it's for global peace and security, when it is not. It's much more a deceptive organization than you think. But you have to delve into the history, and I can't here on this channel. So please remember now to like the videos so that the video can be pushed along the algorithm. YouTube is practicing its shenanigans. Not since Michael Manley, the former prime minister in the 1970s, other than Cuba's outlier, Fidel Castro, has the Caribbean produced a leader of such global appeal with respect across ideological boundaries. I did mention here that Mia Mottley is no Michael Manley and she's no Fidel Castro, I should extend. Mia Mottley is no Fidel Castro, neither is she any Michael Manley, both in rhetoric and also in deed. Right? She does not stand equally on equal grounds, on unequal footing with any of these major Caribbean leaders and characters. I am not sure what world the editor of The Gleaner is living in, right? Not sure. But, one of the things that I've realized, once you begin to embrace a certain ideology, a certain narrative, it's very difficult to come out of that narrative. And that is why parents have to be careful of schooling your children, because this is what most of them, this is a narrative that many of them will be indoctrinated into. It's a secular religion that if you don't have a woman at the helm, or if you don't have a Black person at the helm, it means therefore the world is going to go on the toilet. It's not just about having a Black face, what you call a Black face. right? Because there's no blackface, but that is what the powers that be have indoctrinated you into believing. And that if the blackface stands at the helm of these so-called powerful organizations like that of Barack Obama, that things are going to go well. And many people did not hold Barack Obama to account because it's a blackface, according to what they've told you. It's a blackface at the helm of that white institution of the White House, and he is the most powerful, he was at the time, the most powerful man in the world. And you believe that. And you thought that you went to sleep, right? You went into a coma because you think that everything was okay. And you had your party in celebration of the first Black president of the United States. And in the Caribbean, people would have their parties in celebration of the first female United Nations, rather, General Secretary. And the fact that she's coming from the Caribbean and she's a woman, absolutely. And you would celebrate and you would eat your rice and peas, right? And all of the sumptuous dishes that come from the different Caribbean islands, right? I'm sure you would do that, not understanding that their gender remains the same. And there's nothing that Amor Mottley or Andrew Holness or any of them, if they were to head that organization, would do, because they would have to go along with the agenda. Ask Kofi Annan, right, who was General Secretary from Ghana, ask him if he didn't have to go along with the agenda, right? Ask him, or read his book. I think he's now deceased, right? Am I correct? I think Kofi Annan is now deceased, if I recall correctly. But read his books and read his quotes when he was then the General Secretary of the United Nations, particularly during the Iraq War, the war on terror that was waged on the Iraqis in 2003, right? Did he believe that there were weapons of mass destruction? No, he didn't, but he had to go along with the agenda because that is what the people who work there are tasked with doing. So let's not be in any state of delusion that Amor Mottley is going to change and she's going to ruffle feathers at the United Nations. She's not going to do that. She's not going to do that, right? And she doesn't have the tenacity to do that. She's just talking and they allow her to speak because they know that she's fooling you guys into believing that she is this singular politician, that she is this change agent of change that is going to make the world a better place through her climate change agenda and her climate change nonsense. It's not going to happen. Time and circumstances, of course, matter. Miss Mottley, unlike Manley or Mr. Manley, operates in a post-Cold War and, until recently, largely unipolar world. Now, it's interesting that the Gleaner here, I wonder what world they're living in again. The Cold War never ended. And if you read the history of the Cold War, that's what we were told in school, that the Cold War ended when the collapse of the Berlin Wall, but the Cold War never ended. It has been ongoing. And from the very day that the Berlin Wall fell, even though, the United States had an agreement with the Soviets, with Russia, that, she would not expand eastward, not an inch eastward, because Russia would have been threatened by the expansion, and that none of these former Soviet blocs would have become a part of NATO. But the United States did not really honor its promises, right? It does not fulfill its promises. As a result of that, we have been seeing a lot of wars within that Eastern Bloc of the Soviet Union, well, what were formerly blocks of the Soviet Union. And the wars have been ongoing until we saw 2 years ago, or was it 3 years ago, the war between Russia and the Ukraine, because the United States was actually arming to its teeth the Ukraine and also putting nuclear weapons, and that is on the border of Russia, and Russia is going to react, and they did react. But the Gleaner will give you a different story. The Gleaner is going to give you the narrative coming from the New York Times, from the Financial Times, and also from the New York Times. That is what they're going to give you. They're going to give you that narrative, and people believe that narrative, that Russia was the provocateur and was the aggressor. And, that's not true, right? The story and the narrative is more nuanced than we listen to. And that's why we have to read, we have to delve into these matters for ourselves. We can't rely on the mainstream media to fill us in with the news, because they're just giving you what they're conditioning your minds for wars, for economic disaster, for economic collapse, and you just accept it. And you say, this is the story, and you run with it. Now, one of the things that is very interesting about deception in this world, and I have to say this, if you look carefully at Elon Musk, right, who is this so-called conservative under Trump, and he is diametrically opposed to whatever the Democrats are doing, because the Democrats are supposedly progressives. Are they? The Democrats are not progressives, right? They are just as right-wing as you see the Republicans, a little bit more to the center, but they are right. They're more right than center, right? And the Republicans have gone to the extreme right. So we have two right-wing parties in the United States, and in just around the Western world. In the Western world, if I should speak the truth, right? Right-wing parties, they're conservatives in their ideologies. They pretend culturally to be progressive and liberal, but they're not. Right? They are not, and don't be fooled by what they're saying. But look at what is happening with Elon Musk. He is pretending that he's on Trump's side, and this Trump side is suggesting that there is no climate threat, right? At the same time, who was behind the climate thing, and we have to, change our source of energy and all of the machines and the equipment that would buy to conserve on energy? The same Elon Musk. This electric cars and all of that stuff is Elon Musk which controls it. Do you think Elon Musk was going to go into Trump's party if he hadn't had the guarantee that his businesses would have increased increased financially, that his wealth would have increased financially, his financial wealth would have increased? Let me say it properly, right? Yes, the fact that he went there as an investor, as the richest man in the world, means that he knew that he would have inked out a deal with Trump, that Trump had won the election, which it seemed clearly that was planned for him to have won the election, that, this man's wealth would have increased. And yesterday I was reading in a newspaper that Elon Musk's wealth, for all the businesses combined, has increased like $617 billion. All the businesses combined. I mean, it's on paper, it might not be, but that is what the projected analysis of his wealth, his projected wealth will be over $617 billion since he joined the Trump administration. Right? So when we talk about the fact that Trump is anti-climate change, it might not be so, because when he has this man who thinks about the whole matter of Elon Musk's philosophy is that, we can go to Mars, right? If the Earth is threatened, and they're already saying that the climate is going to threaten the Earth. So, Elon Musk believes in this interplanetary existence, that, people from Earth will be able to live in Mars if the Earth should be threatened by climate change, and we should all become extinct on this Earth, so we just go to Mars. Now, Trump believes that too. If you listen to his interview with that guy there, the one who has a lot of followers on YouTube, and I think they kicked him off, Joe Rogan, right? If you had listened to his interview with Joe Rogan, Trump said very clearly that he believes that we can live on Mars, and he has brought into this Mars theory, and the fact that if Earth here, if it doesn't work, if life does not really succeed for us on this planet, it means therefore that we can go to Mars to live. So what is this thing that the Republicans are anti-climate change? They might not be doing it, and might have rescinded from the Paris Accord, but at the end of the day, behind the scenes, the same agenda continues in earnest. Right? The same agenda is there. It's just in a different style. And the money is directed towards a different person. Maybe not to the Paris Accord in France, maybe to Elon Musk and his Jesuit supporters and backers. Right? For his advocacy of a non-alignment, his campaign for a new international economic order, to address the imbalance in global economic financial arrangement. The Gleaner is now talking about Michael Manley, his trenchant opposition to South Africa's apartheid and relations with Cuba. Mr. Manley was branded as a dangerous crypto-communist. The divisive dissonance of the time ensured that leaders who advocated those positions made limited or no headway, right? So Mr. Manley was touted as a crypto communist for his belief in the advocacy of a non-alignment, his campaign for a new international economic order, and to address the imbalance in global economic financial arrangements, and also his trenchant opposition to South Africa's apartheid and relations with Cuba. Now, Manley was principled, and he stood up, at least in the 1970s, for these social causes, for these social agendas. In many respects, stripped of the ideological overburden of the 1970s, many of the issues for which people like Michael Manley campaigned are very much on today's global agenda, even if the language they are framed and some of the specific matters to be addressed have evolved, right? So climate change is now a matter of existential threat to vast swaths or swathes of the globe and their citizens, especially those who live in poor and middle-income countries. How these countries finance their adaptation to a hotter Earth, to whose heating they contributed little, is a contentious issue. So this is the agenda of Miss Mia Amor Mottley. She is there to convince the United Nations that the richer countries need to pay more to protect the smaller countries, right, who are at great risk or danger due to climate change. But will she? And if the bigger countries, if the wealthier countries are convinced to do that, which they're going through very terrible times too. There are lots of turmoil in the United States as we speak, in Great Britain, in all of these so-called wealthier developed nations. Their citizens are very, very angry with what is happening because they're realizing that their government has been stealing them and has been lying to them for decades. For decades, they have been doing that. And so where's the money going to come from? Now that these nations are also becoming impoverished and the money is going into the pockets of billionaires like the Elon Musks of the world and the Bill Gates. And they're faced with this crisis even as they contend with paying for their normal development and the global financial system. Now, as I talk about Bill Gates, if you notice here that during the pandemic, Bill Gates was, every day in the news. And I think at that time, he was the wealthiest man in the world too, right? Due to his vaccine sales and all of what he was doing and the prominence that he held during the pandemic. But now we're not hearing anything about Bill Gates. In fact, I don't think he occupies the seat of the five wealthiest men of the world. I don't think he's among the wealthiest right now. Maybe he's in the top 10, but he's certainly not in the top 5 based on my recent reading that came from Bloomberg. Right? He's not listed as the top 5 wealthiest man in the world. The point I'm trying to make here is that these people are, they stand on sand, whether it's the Elon Musk or the Bill Gates or all of these people, right? Today they're number 1, tomorrow the number 2, or the Mark Zuckerbergs or the Amazon guy, Jeff Bezos, right? These people, they just occupy. So very soon Elon Musk is going to die out, right? But he's given that position now to wield as much power as he can. Now, yesterday I was reading an article from Wired newspaper, which was suggesting that Elon Musk might not be the person who is heading the Dodge department, even though we're told that he's the one running the show. The people in the White House are suggesting, aides, workers who work there are suggesting that they don't know who, even they don't know who is heading the Dodge department. But Elon Musk is the face. That is the face of the Dodge that we see. And people are talking about him and they're chatting, and they don't know that behind the scenes, there are people who are more powerful than the president himself, who are, actually running the show in that White House, right? We have to make sure that we understand how politics is run in America. And Aaron Good, who wrote about American imperialism. He wrote about American exceptionism, not exceptionalism, but no, exception, America's exception. And I can't remember the title of his book. I think I did tell you about that book, Aaron Good's book. He wrote, that was his dissertation, which he upgraded into a book. I read his dissertation from cover to cover, and it was very, very interesting and something that everyone, all of us should read. But he speaks about the tripartite state of the United States, that we have the state of the deep, what we call the deep state, the national security state, and we also have the state that we see, the government, the president and vice president. So oftentimes what we're looking at, we just look at what we see, the one state, which is the president and his aides and his governors and ministers, right? But we do not look at what is behind the scenes and the two other types of the state, the ones that are actually running concurrently, right? These are happening at the same time, right? The national security state, the deep state, and also the public state, if you will. Okay, so we have states within states which are running the show, something that we have to understand. So Amor Mottley here is not going to change the current of things on the international scene. She can't, and she will not. Amor Mottley, charismatic, of sharp intellect, clear perspectives, and great courage, has emerged as the most consistent and articulate voice of the existential concerns of the global south, including the small island developing states, such as those in the Caribbean. I would say that she is articulate where climate change is concerned. And if I don't, Amor Mottley is not even a scientist, right? She's a lawyer by training. How is she going to be, for example, this great expert on climate change? She's only rattling off what she has been told, right? She's no expert in science. What does Amor Mottley know about science? Perhaps very little, if anything, right? But she brags herself here as the climate expert. She readily and willingly speaks truth to the powerful. What truth is she speaking? Did she talk about the truth with Haiti and the fact that the United States is actually, imposing its neoliberal agenda onto Haiti, and that the United States is not really trying to bring stabilization in Haiti? But she told us the opposite. And she was involved in the official meeting there with Blinken in Kingston when, during the Haitian government transition, right? And this whole new council that the United States has created. Amor Mottley is behind it. If she did not head it, she's heading it as the premier Caribbean leader, right? I'm not sure that Michael Manley would have endorsed that, would have endorsed US imperialism in Haiti. I don't think that Fidel Castro, had he been alive, would have endorsed Amor Mottley's, connections with the United States. I don't think he would have. And the fact that she was actually pushing forward their agenda in Haiti. I don't think that Fidel Castro would have endorsed her as this quintessential Caribbean leader, as the Gleaner is here suggesting. I don't think he would have done that. She does so not in hectoring fashion, but from the perspective of a shared humanity. Apart from the power and legitimacy of her message, her easy management or engagement rather with the popular culture, she will readily quote a Bob Marley song, and she loves that, or from an Ashabi novel in her speeches. Miss Mottley has captured people's imaginations across the world, but especially in the global south. Now, as I suggested, she has captured the people who don't understand politics and who do not understand globalism and international diplomacy, or the United States functioning in the capacity as a global empire. So in terms of that, yes, she has captured their imagination. But were they able, I should say, were the people of the world able to be educated about this global hegemon called the United States? and her global conquests, then I do not think that people would necessarily be impressed with Mia Amor Mottley. If they were to understand that she was on the committee of the IMF, of the International Monetary Fund, and that she lauds and endorses this neoliberal institution, I don't think that they would have been happy with Mia Amor Mottley. If they knew also that Miss Mia Amor Mottley congratulated Dr. Nigel Clark on his ascent to the IMF, and she thought that it was a great opportunity. Though she knows, because she works on the committees of the IMF or was a former committee member, she would have suggested that based on Nigel Clark's stewardship of the Jamaican economy and the fact that all of those toxic policies that he implemented, which the IMF praised him for doing, which has left the Jamaican economy poorer, even though they're telling us to the contrary. But people who study, the whole neoliberal and neoliberalism understand that the Jamaican economy will never resuscitate based on those toxic policies. Will never, because it was a lie in the first place. Everything that they said that the IMF did was a lie. And you can't grow on a lie. You can't build. You can't lay a solid foundation based on a lie. And that is what the IMF has done with the complicity of the Jamaican government, both PNP and JLP. And Jamaicans are going to suffer for years based on that great lie that they have told us. Make sure that you like and you share and you're subscribing to the channel. So Mia Mottley is now being pushed at least by the Gleaner. I'm sure that the other sister newspapers in the Caribbean will be joining the Gleaner in supporting the candidacy of Miss Mia Amor Mottley for the next UN General Secretary. Now, if that happens, let it be. But the fact of the matter, I know that nothing is going to be of any great change at the United Nations. And the life for Caribbean citizens will continue to have hurricanes, we're going to continue to have earthquakes, and no amount of money or no amount of planning that they're doing is going to save us from these climate disasters. Only God can save us from these climate disasters. I'm not suggesting that we can't put things in place, but these people here are phony, right? They're not people who believe in God. And God can only work his miracles by people who believe in him. These people believe that they are powerful and that they can control God's creative genius and his creative works. Nobody but God can control his creative works, right? He sometimes gives us a little, leeway for us to fool ourselves and believe in our greatness when we are not great. And then he steps in to show us that he is the one who is in control at the end of the day, right? So they can praise, the Gleaner can praise Miss Mia Amor Mottley all they want to do. And they can, sing her song to the United Nations, that she needs to be the next General Secretary of the United Nations. However, nothing is going to change fundamentally for any of the nations in the global south. This is my, humble petition to you all. And I hope that you'll have a fantastic afternoon. See you in another one. Remember now to like and to share and subscribe. All the best. Adios.